Hello everybody and welcome to my first review, and it's going to be a classic one. It's the Fourth Doctor and K9 from Warrior Times.
Hello everybody and welcome to my first review, and it is going to be a classic one. It's the Fourth Doctor and K9 from Warrior Times. What was I going on about back then? I've got no idea. This is of course the Fourth Doctor and K9 from the Season 18 Fourth Doctor story, Warrior's Gate. Not War Times, not Warrior Times. However, that was in fact my first ever mistake on camera, back reviewing in 2010 for my first ever review on TheHostProductions. In fact, exactly 10 years ago today. So for the sake of celebration, I suppose, a little bit of an anniversary special, I'm going to be going back 10 years and refilming my first ever Doctor Who action figure review. And no doubt, as you have probably already noticed, this review looks ever so slightly different, because this time, and for one review only, we have ditched the white background and instead brought back something that I used to use back in the day. This is in fact my old TARDIS wall backdrop, the original, exactly the same one that I used on the videos that I filmed back in 2010, 2011 onwards, and it's lovely to have it back, I can't lie. It's something of which that I kept in storage just in case I decided to revisit this video a few years later for my 10th anniversary. So I suppose that this review has actually been planned for quite a number of years. Just a little bit of fun, something that I thought I would do to kind of show how much the channel and myself, I suppose, has changed over the last 10 years, and hopefully the budget and production values have kind of increased ever so slightly. Before filming this review, I was actually tempted to go very dedicated to try and make this review as close as possible to that of the original version by tweaking the camera angle ever so slightly to put it at an angle, and then out focusing the camera ever so slightly so you can hardly see what the action figure is. Of course, turning off the studio lights because it was as well quite dark on an evening, and just to replicate the sound of the initial review, turning on a hairdryer in the background to make it sound as muffled as the microphone did back then. But I figure that you probably won't want to listen to that. I can recall filming it in my kitchen on a rather cold winter's evening, and yet here I am 10 years later filming exactly the same review once again, this time not at home, but in fact in my university accommodation while studying for my degree, something of which that if you told me 10 years ago I would be doing, I would think you absolutely insane. So yes, in that time I've done quite a lot of stuff, to be fair. I started off the channel as I was coming out of primary school, and of course now I have a whole set of GCSEs. I then went on to college and did A-levels, and now I've moved to the city to university, so I think it's fair to say a lot of stuff has changed. However, my love for collecting small plastic Doctor Who action figures has remained the same. Compared to the other Forbidden Planet exclusive collector sets released around this time during 2010, the Warrior's Gate set isn't exactly the most standout. Looking back, I most likely decided to choose this set as a starting point. I can't exactly go wrong with only the Doctor and K9 now, can I? He says whilst getting the name of the story wrong within the first 20 seconds. Well, I suppose we all start somewhere. The recommended retail price was £19.99, therefore slightly cheaper to other Forbidden Planet exclusive 2-packs to make up for the fact that K9 is technically not even half the size of a usual 5.5 action figure. The set came packaged in the usual bubble display blister pack, including the Russell T Davies era new series logo. Prior to the release of this set, the main body for the Fourth Doctor was released as a part of the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive series of that year, with the Fifth Doctor's head regenerated on top. Therefore, a Season 18 variation of the Fourth Doctor was anticipated for some time at this point. To date, this figure has only been released one other time within the 13 Doctors collector set, with some upgraded paint application. Therefore, it is in fact quite a collectible action figure, and is probably one that will get released as a part of the B&M exclusive series at some point in the future. It's certainly one that I imagine a lot of action figure collectors would like to see released again.
Now, first I'm going to start off with the Fourth Doctor.
Let's take a look at the 4th Doctor action figure of the set. Now, I really do love this variant of the 4th Doctor. It's always at the front of the shelf, and it's always pride of place because it is a costume variation that I simply absolutely adore. So if you have the opportunity to get this figure at any point in the future, I highly recommend doing so. I absolutely love it, and I love the different shades of burgundy. Burgundy is my personal favourite shade of colour, and I just love the way it all comes together. So I have in fact removed the scarf to take a closer look at the costume itself and reveal all of the details underneath. Get the inclusion of the 4th Doctor's shirt. This has been sculpted in a white plastic and does feature a number of small subtle details, including a few creases and wrinkles. There is also a set of buttons running down the very middle. In the TV show itself, there was of course a number of occasions where the collars of the shirt did in fact protrude above the jacket itself to expose 2 question marks on either side. Of course, a design choice that will be carried across all of the John Nathan Turner Doctors. Sadly, on this figure, that has not been included.
Question marks on his neck here haven't been put in.
No doubt to keep the design overall of the figure a little bit more simplistic. We have the actual trench coat itself, which I do adore. Now, from memory, from what I can remember, the one in the 13 Doctors collector's set is in fact sculpted in an ever so slightly darker version of plastic. There is a number of different details on this. So to start off with, we have buttons running up the side here, which have been painted a rather lovely glossy paint application, as well as of course the sculpting of the lapels at either side, and a number of buttonholes running down the middle. Of course, this figure does also sport your usual creased and wrinkled material effect sitting on the body rather naturally. As we move to the side of the action figure, we do also get a little bit of additional creasing on the side of the waist there to replicate the pockets, and then as we move all the way around to the back, we get the inclusion of a further stitching design, almost a pleated edge there coming down the middle, as well as the inclusion of a smaller belt with 2 buttons at either side. Of course, one of the main differences between this figure and the 5th Doctor Regenerated is
A green stain isn't on the 4th Doctor.
Replicate the opening scene of the Regeneration after he has fell from the tower. However, this is no longer present on this action figure to replicate a more pristine look that the 4th Doctor had throughout Doctor Who's season 18.
It's different by the fact that, well, it's got a different head, obviously.
And as we move further up the coat, we get the inclusion of the shoulder piece, which once again has been painted in an ever so slightly darker plastic, setting it apart from the rest of the coat. Now, this rather nicely sits on the top of the 4th Doctor's shoulders, and does also carry across around to the back as well, where we have this ever so slightly darker burgundy lip. And as for the arms, nothing really to talk about here. Of course, we have the continuation of the coat, once again featuring a few creases and wrinkles, and then we have the sculpting of the hands, one of which is in the regular open palm position, and the other has been sculpted in your standard Doctor hand position to hold the sonic screwdriver accessory. Moving further down the figure now to take a look at the trousers, you guessed it, we have even more burgundy. This time round you have a few creases and wrinkles that have been sculpted into the trousers themselves, as well as a suggestion of a few stitching lines at the very top, and of course pockets either side of the waist, the regular stuff that you come to expect on trousers, and there is no further paint application detailing on this. So we here also taking a look at the inside of the jacket, as this had just been sculpted in a standard burgundy coloured plastic. There is no further detailing within this, and there isn't the green lining that is seen on the season 18 coat itself, but to be honest, I think having that on a 5.5 action figure is a little bit of a stretch. Finishing up for the main costume, we get the inclusion of the 4th Doctor's boots. Now, I really do love the finish that has been applied to these. Basically, we have a light brown paint application, and then an ever so slightly darker brown added across the top, and even a thin, darker line there to represent the sole at the very bottom. It most certainly looks like a leather material that has been worn over time, and that darker paint application really brings out those creases and wrinkles within the material itself. Now, in case the 4th Doctor's costume wasn't burgundy enough, of course we also get the inclusion of the large 4th Doctor scarf. Again, I absolutely love the design of this. I love the way that we have these different strands coming down, as well as the loop running around the middle. It most certainly replicates the rather large and bulky style of the season 18 scarf. Also, within the TV show, arguably, you could say it was even more bulky compared to this. However, considering it's been made of plastic, they've done a very good job of replicating the design and pattern using a similar colour palette. Have a base colour of red, and then over the top of this we have a number of different shades that have been used, including a lighter, almost burnt orange, as well as a few purples in there as well. Scarf seen within the 13 Doctors collector's set, from what I can recall, is in fact ever so slightly more accurate compared to this one. Due to the way that the scarf sits on the shoulders, we do have an ever so slight change in sculpt. Now this is in fact been done to make the scarf sit more naturally on the body, and to be honest it works quite well. So as a result we've needed to sacrifice a little bit of the hair, so chunk missing here at the very bottom, so that the scarf can kind of sit closely to the neck itself. Now due to the 4th Doctor having lots of tight curls with the grey highlight applied over the top, it doesn't actually stand out that much. I think it would be fair to say, because the 5th Doctor Regenerated also uses a very similar style of sculpt, it is a lot more obvious on that release, and to be honest, for the 4th Doctor it works quite well. Applying the scarf around the shoulders, it really completes the look for the 4th Doctor, and he looks absolutely excellent. And then finally, for this action figure, we move on to the likeness of that of Tom Baker. And
the accuracy to this figure is actually quite good. It's a new head sculpt from the other 4th Doctor figures.
I really do like this head sculpt. I think it has a lot of nice details, and you can most definitely tell who it is meant to be. Now, of course, over the years of the Classic Series action figure line, as I've covered within the History series I've been doing within 2019 and 2020, there's been a lot of rather worried-looking Tom Baker action figures over the years. This version of Tom is in fact considerably sharp. In particular, I really love the inclusion of the detailing around the eyes. Of course, we get the inclusion of the eye whites in there, as well as a lighter blue iris that has been applied, with even a small dot in there to represent a reflection, most definitely looking rather natural, not too overdone, not too caricature. As we move to the lower half of the face, we also get the inclusion of the lips, which again have been given a rather baby pink highlight, and then of course the skin tone is rather natural in there as well. The paint overall is not that thick, therefore as a result we really get to see that bone structure, in particular around the sides of the cheeks and even the jawline. I also really like the way that the hair sits on the face as well. Again, it looks very natural. Of course, we get the inclusion of the sideburns down the side, which have been painted a rather similar paint application to the rest of the hair itself, as opposed to the earlier version of Tom, where his sideburns appeared to be a completely different shade of colour compared to the rest of the main body of the hair itself. And of course, overall for the hair, it has been given a much more condensed, curly approach, so we have lots of details within this. Of course, lots of curls here and there, especially around the front here. As we move towards the sides as well, we even get the addition of a few strands that are almost poking up above the sculpt itself to make it look rather wild and natural. And the same can be said as we turn to the back, the curls within the hair in particular poking up towards the back. And of course, to emphasise this design, we even have the inclusion of a light grey paint application on this, emphasising the curls and bringing out each individual strand of hair. The 4th Doctor action figure will be complete without his sonic screwdriver, so this is exactly the same sculpt to usual. You can most definitely tell what it is meant to be. The vast majority of the body of the Sonic is of course silver, and then we have a black collar running around the middle, as well as the red emitter at the top, which does seem to be ever so slightly darker compared to some of the other sonic screwdrivers released as a part of the classic action figure series.
Now, here is K9.
Of course, it's really lovely to have a K9 to display alongside the 4th Doctor, especially given the context of 2020, and we now have a Sarah Jane to also go alongside the 4th Doctor as well as multiple different variations of Leela. Now, of course, this is one of those rather rare occasions where if you get the opportunity to get the non-Forbidden Planet exclusive variation of K9, as in the one released as a part of the B&M exclusive series, then to be honest, I recommend getting that one over this one. It's usually the case that the Forbidden Planet exclusive, the original from the back in the day, is usually a little bit better. If you have the new series version of K9, then you pretty much also have the K9 seen throughout this set.
Still a nice figure for the classic line, but they haven't gone through the effort to even take the console off or even just glue this panel on.
This is the pristine version of K9, so as a result we don't have any of those brown rusted marks that we got to see on the Series 2 school reunion variation of the character, but instead we just have the standard silvery blue paint application. For the most part, the vast majority of K9's body has been sculpted in that silvery blue plastic. However, we do have a few further additional details on this. It's light grey tubing, which does of course go around all four sides of the character to kind of hide the wheels underneath, I suppose. Again, this is painted exactly the same to the new series variation. Flipping around to the back, we get the inclusion of this small rectangle here, which I do believe within classic series Doctor Who, in fact, had a black thick line running around the middle. And then for the most part, this was painted white to represent a screen that was seen within K9's debut story, being the invisible enemy. As we flip around to the back of the figure, we do get the inclusion of this small plastic tab as well as K9's tail. This has a black base with a number of different lines on, as well as the antenna tail itself, which has been painted with a silver paint application. Now this has been sculpted in a rather flimsy rubbery plastic in order to ensure that it doesn't snap, of course, because it's a rather thin piece and overall works well. Although of course due to the scale it is ever so slightly thicker compared to what we got to see on screen. As we rotate around to the front, we do once again get the inclusion of this small tab at the very bottom, as well as K9's collar. Again, I do believe that this was an ever so slightly different pattern within classic series Doctor Who. Suggestion of the dog tag there, just below the collar itself, which has been simply added using a silver paint application. As for the actual neck, this has been sculpted in a darker grey plastic and does feature all the usual ridges that you come to expect on the K9 design, and overall works well. As with all of the many different versions of K9, along the top of the main body unit, we do also have the inclusion of a control panel, which has been replicated using a few buttons and red screens, and naturally, of course, this is a separate sculpt, as it does act as a button, as when pressed, it reveals the chest unit underneath. Removable chest plate feature is something of which that is left behind from the new series variation of K9, but to be honest, as a kid back in the day, I really enjoyed this because you could pretend that the Fourth Doctor was trying to fix K9 from his numerous different emergencies and accidents that he found himself in, especially throughout Doctor Who Season 18, because I think it's fair to say that every single story has a different and more inventive way, from trying to kill off the character from having his head whacked off, to even exploding on Brighton Beach. Season 18 has quite a variety of K9 deaths. And this is exactly the same to the new series variation of K9, so as a result we do have a bronze base colour that has been used, and then over the top of this you have the sculpting of various buttons and wires and control units, as well as a few highlights in a blue paint, red paint and kind of a murky orange paint in there as well. And then finally, for sculpting detail, moving up to K9's head.
It's a really good likeness to K9.
Of course, if you've got other versions of K9 within your collection, you know exactly what to expect, as they are pretty much all exactly the same. Base colour, of course, once again being silver and blue, and then at the end of the snout you get the inclusion of a black and silver paint application to represent the gun that is hidden, of course, within K9's snout. As we move up to the midpoint, eye visor piece, which has been replicated using a piece of transparent red plastic, and again a few further details have been represented within this, including of course a little data reader in the very middle, and then as we move up to the very top of the head, small dishes that usually waggle within a TV show itself to represent K9's little ears. So overall, the proportions seem right, and it most definitely looks like K9.
Well, it's really good.
So in conclusion, for K9, it is a really lovely action figure. I do like how they've managed to replicate K9 within this scale, of course having the waggly tail at the back and the two ears at the top of the head, and even the transparent visor section on the very top of the head as well. It's all very nice, and you can most definitely tell who it is meant to be. As for the paint application, it's all very crisp. I love the individual coloured buttons at the top of the chest unit, and of course the K9 lettering on the front of the body as well. It's all very nice indeed. It's just a shame that this is the new series version of K9 as opposed to the classic series one. As I mentioned earlier, we did get a B&M exclusive that is much more accurate to the classic series. It's just a very questionable release as to why that wasn't done in the first place. But that said, I suppose this K9 is a good median to go with either classic series Doctors or new series Doctors, and to be honest, he works well. He's most definitely a welcome addition to the shelf. For the first few years of the Host Productions, each and every review was recorded in one take. God knows how I did it, because I certainly couldn't do that today. I'm very much reliant on being able to edit reviews. However, something brilliant that I noticed in the first ever review, and something of which that I've not noticed until all of these years later, is that I forget the terminology and wording for pull back and go, as in friction, and because it was my first ever review, I was considerably nervous. Now, as you have already seen throughout this review, the original footage is in fact rather bad with sound quality, therefore I have added subtitles, but what I really love is you can in fact hear my dad in the background saying friction in order to prompt me to get the word right whilst filming the video. And it's something of which, as I say, that I've only just noticed today, but is a really lovely memory and kind of an insight into how nervous I was filming my first ever video, completely forgetting words, and to be honest, I still do that today.
Yeah, you may have caught that, but it is remote control, but it's friction. So it's very good. It's quite powerful with a friction.
So in summary, for the 4th Doctor and K9 action figure collector set from the Season 18 story, Warrior Times. It's a decent set, I really do like it. It's one of my personal favourites, probably because of sentimental value. However, I think that overall the 4th Doctor action figure is one of my personal favourites that has ever been released. And I think it is really great to have the multiple different versions of the 4th Doctor costumes lined up in chronological order. And then you can kind of see the different eras within Tom Baker's reign, spanning between the different companions and costumes, and this very different and striking look that we got to see to close out his era. Overall, it has been excellently recreated within the 5.5 action figure scale, and in particular, I love the different shades of burgundy that have been used, the inclusion of the scarf. I think that the likeness to that of Tom Baker is also very nice as well. I love the inclusion of the new hair sculpt being a bit more curly, and that grey highlight nicely in there as well to finish it off. As for K9, yes, it is the new series version of K9 and there is no hiding that, but it is still nice to have a K9 to go alongside the 4th Doctor. It has some great details, your sculpting and paint application overall is sharp and crisp. So yes, this is one of those collector sets I think that looking back, you can kind of go either way. If you can find this boxed at a good price, I most definitely recommend purchasing it because it is one of the more rare of the Forbidden Planet exclusive collector sets. However, to be honest, if you get the opportunity to get Tom Baker single-cardedly, I most definitely recommend doing that. Either this one or the one from the 13 Doctors collector set. Both of them are nice for different reasons, and of course the K9 is exactly the same to the new series one, so no doubt you can pick it up for considerably cheap. So yes, that is that. That is the Warrior's Gate, or Warrior Times collector set, and the first ever Doctor Who action figures that I reviewed on the Host Productions a whole 10 years ago. Boy, doesn't time fly. And with that, that does of course conclude the recreation of my first ever Doctor Who action figure review in celebration of 10 years of the Host Productions. Of course, it just has been a little bit of fun kind of looking back on how much the channel has changed and hopefully improved throughout the years. However, I'm not going to be ending off this review. I'm in fact going to be leaving it to 11-year-old me to sign off.
Thank you for watching this review. Next, I will be reviewing the Series 5 and 6 TARDIS Flight Control. Thank you for watching. Bye!
And of course, with it being a special anniversary video, it's a goodbye to the old background as well. It's been a joy having it back. It's been a very nice trip of nostalgia. Who knows, maybe we'll be revisiting this review in 2030.